Good afternoon today, all my lovely friends. Today we will take up in this program the topic called elections in India. This is part of our political science program, political science setup, and it's a very important topic because India is considered as one of the stable, operating, active democracy in the world. As the biggest democracy in the world with the largest amount of population, largest amount of electorate and the greatest number of constituencies, elections really is an important function for us where we exert and exercise what we call our basic fundamental political rights. The right to vote, the right to stand as a candidate and the right which follows all this express freedom of opinion, freedom of expression and many other political rights which our constitution has given us. In fact, one big important section of the constitution which is called the fundamental rights in India clearly gives us this particular set of rights which we in turn have been exercising in the past so many years in Indian constitution and Indian democratic practice. This fundamental rights is not merely mentioned in the constitution, but it is guaranteed in the constitution. It is guaranteed being the judicial system in India. So, the judiciary protects our fundamental rights and guarantees it for all of us to exercise it. And this particular fundamental rights is extremely important for another reason, namely this is a universal adult suffrage, which means the right to exercise our political rights is something which has no distinction by way of the people or citizens in this country, men and women, without any distinction by way of caste, creed, class or religion or any other consideration, exercise this particular political right. There are only 2-3 exceptions to this exemption, which is given as by way of the criminals, lunatics and others. But all the others exercise it over a period of time from 1952 when we had the first election in a free India. So, it's something which is based on universal adult suffrage. It is called adult because any individual who is above the age of 18 has this right to vote. Previously, we had any individual who had the right of this right if he is the right 21 years old. Now, it has been brought down to the age of 18 because we do believe that our young generation should take part and can take part and will be able to exercise this right very responsibly. So, the fundamental rights of voting in the elections, choosing the representatives and standing as a candidate, running the democracy in an indirect form now belongs to any child who is above the age of 18 in this country. So, this is how it has become one of the largest electorate in this world and is considered as one of the most able democracy in this particular world. So, election becomes an important central pillar of Indian democracy because it is the one which finally really chooses who is going to rule us. How long are they going to rule us? Normally, the elections in India are for a period of 5 years. Unless something happens, we have regular elections at the end of every 5 years in this particular country. So, we consider this as a central pillar of Indian democracy because not merely it assures us the right to choose our rulers and thereby we ourselves become the rulers indirectly, coming into active participation once in 5 years, but even during the lull period of 5 years, we still are the rulers because those who rule us are really our representatives and the rulers themselves are ourselves. So, it is a political rule, political power, political democracy in which we have been living there, not just in democracy where the rulers are either selected or nominated or come through a war or come through some succession, but essentially because we want them to be our rulers for 5 years. And this is also done by way of a majority rule, in the sense that we go and vote in the elections, but there are many people who stand in the elections on the basis of either individuals, independents, or on the basis of political parties. Some of them may get, some political party may get more than the others do. So, that becomes a majority rule. So, in this indirect democracy in actual practice is a majority rule, but even those who are minority, who do not get elected in this, have a role to play, because they sit there as our conscience keepers and they are sitting in the opposition, thereby keeping this majority in check. So, they also in a way are representatives who are also ruling on our behalf under our mandate to please us, so that the rest of the community can be pursuing their normal other types of duties. It is also because the modern democracy are all big in size. In ancient Greek times, the democracies were very small. They were really city-states. One big city was a state. Now, we have every state having so many cities, so much of population, so much of space, that we cannot assemble in one place in order to run the country. So, because of that, we have this representative democracy, the indirect democracy, where we choose our representatives, but tell them, look, we have given you the mandate for 5 years, rule well. At the end of the 5 years, we will really keep a check on you. Or sometimes it even happens that if the people are unhappy or something happens, then even this 5-year rule need not be followed. We can even have what you call a mid-term elections. In India, from the time we became independent in 1952, till 2014, when we had the latest election to Lok Sabha, or the lower house of the parliament, we have had about 16 elections. These 16 elections sometimes have been regularly at 5 years, but 2 or 3 occasions it also has been before 5 years, what we call mid-term elections. That is where even though we should have had only 5 elections, much less elections, we are having now 16 elections having taken place in this country. So, in May 2014, we had the 16th election to Lok Sabha, whose representatives now are running the government in this particular country, with a majority party and a minor party and a lot of other parties together, both in the government as well as in the opposition. We are having the parliament today, which is really running it. Currently, in fact, the parliament is meeting and is deciding a lot of policies and other measures on behalf of the Indian citizens, especially those who gave their votes in the elections. So, this is precisely why we believe that elections is the central pillar of any democracy. And the fact that India has had a regular democracy, regular elections, sometimes more than what is due, makes Indian democracy one of the strongest democracies in the world as such, along with maybe countries like USA, UK and many others. We also can claim to be a very stable political setup. These elections had started even before independence. Even when the British were ruling us, we had 3-4 elections held. But then those elections were not so populist or so democratic as the present elections are since independence, because there we did not follow the universal adult suffrage. There were selective criteria. Some people had the votes, others did not have the votes, either on the basis of their literacy, graduation or wealth, property ownership. So, we do not call them as universal, nor do we call them as universal adult suffrage. But after independence, the constitution did not prescribe any qualification by way of who has the right to vote except the age qualification. So, now whether one is a village or one is urban or one has a property or one does not have a property, whether one is literate, one is not literate, whether one has a PhD or one has a high school, this sort of distinctions are no longer or never followed in India after independence. And also, as I said, we ever since 1952 when we had our first elections, we have been periodically having every 5 years 52, 57, 62, 67, like this we have been having our elections very periodically, and our elections have been very peaceful. In the earlier years they were completely peaceful, but of late a little criminal elements have come in. So, there is a certain amount of booth capturing, violence and things do take place, but by and large, considering the size of India and considering the amount of elections we are going through, considering the huge amount of constituencies we have, and even considering the amount of candidates we have from various sections of the Indian population, including women, the Indian elections are by and large very peaceful, quite fair and quite free. There are occasional aberrations, but still we can claim ourselves to be free and fair, and the Election Commission always gives itself a pat at the end of the elections that they have been able to hold a very challenging elections in India, but very free and very fair. So, that is where we have to take into account to see how big a country is in India, how big a marathon exercise these elections have been in this country, how it has been one of the most challenging tasks for a democracy in the world and in India, so much so that people from various parts of India, the experts, the election commissioners, members of parliament of other countries come over to India during the time of elections and watch this whole stuff as an educative exercise, as one where they at the end of it give us a good chit as a very able democracy. Because the size of our constituencies and the size of the population, the electorate really amazes people in the rest of the world. Over a period of time, we have been expanding in our population. So, more and more people are coming up as voters now. So, there has been a gradual increase in the electorate size, that is those who go and vote in the elections as voters, have been a vast increase over a period of time. We have now millions of people going on that day to vote. We also have increased the number of constituencies from where it was in 1952 to where we are now in 2014. In 1952, we were 499 constituencies. Now, we have moved up to 543 constituencies, almost 44 constituencies more. Because the population has increased and we have a criterion like for so much of population, one representative has to be there. So, if the population increases, we increase the number of constituencies so that more representatives can come into the parliament. So, today we have 543 members as members of Lok Sabha, but the state also has a limit, the constitution also limits how much more we can have. So, we cannot increase too much more by way of number of constituencies or candidate or the membership in the Lok Sabha. So, we may have to go on increasing the number of voters per constituency in the future. For some time it will do that, but with a little more of our population drive coming into focus and becoming effective, maybe we need not have it, because the population may not rise that way in the future as it was doing in the present or in the past. So, in the center we now have 543 seats in Lok Sabha. In the states where we have a lot of legislative assemblies, every state has a legislative assembly, and once again according to the size and the population of the state, we have the number of seats in the state legislative assemblies, which means the number of constituencies in each state differs. We have a state like UP, Uttar Pradesh, where we have the maximum number of constituencies, 425 constituencies it used to be in the state legislature, and it has 85 constituencies in the case of Lok Sabha Parliament. So, from there to then we have very small constituencies in the northeast, where we have only one seat in Lok Sabha and a very few seats for the assemblies. We have states which just about 60 member state assemblies, and we have states which have 300, 400 seats in the state assemblies. This is very much proportionate to the population of the state. So, by now, by about 2000, we have almost 4,000 state assembly constituencies in this country. If you put the various states together, this is not an accurate figure, because recently we have one new state which has been created in the form of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. One Andhra Pradesh has been now split into two. So, with these changes around, then the number also increases. Number of states also now have become 29. So, we have 29 state assemblies and one central Lok Sabha, for which we hold elections every 5 years or sometimes earlier in this country. So, this tells you about how vast the country is, how historically we have been able to do this experiment with ourselves and conceding to the population increase, thereby making our democracy still strong by giving the correct number of representatives to represent the voters in the constituencies. Now, we also see some other very important features of our elections. We have a lot of tables which have come up, which is also attached to this. The first and important one is how many people go and vote in these elections. It becomes quite interesting for us, because in a country like India, which is supposed to be a poor country, a country like India, where we have a lot of illiterates and people living in the rural side, nearly 70% of our people live in the rural side, and our percentage of literacy is not very high. Most of our women, older women, are not so literate. Even in such a country, how do the people go and vote in the elections? Many people believe India will not be able to sustain its democracy for too long. That is what Churchill said it, and that is why very many important Western experts told about us. But despite the lack of literacy, despite the fact that development indicators are very poor, despite the fact that many people still live in the rural side of India, we have voted consistently in the past so many years. Not merely consistently, but more and more people have come up to vote in the elections. This is what we call voter turnout, the participation of the electorate, voters participation rate. This is what is called voters turnout. So, over the years, more and more men and women have come to participate in our elections, and a good amount of percentage gets cast. I will just give you a little figure on this. We have, for instance, the total number of people who voted in our elections in 1952 was 60.5%. From there, we have now increased in 2014 to 66.38%, which means we have literally increased by almost 7%, 6 to 7%. In the case of women, again the more backward of the backward sections in this country, in 1952 37% women voted. It has gone up to 65% in 2014. Once again, a tremendous advancement of the women coming out and voting in the elections, showing their political consciousness, how higher level it has become. Males too, of course, they share the bulk of the turnout. So, males also have increased 53% in 1952 to 68% in 2014. So, which means there has been an increase of people who are taking interest, who are coming before the elections and who are participating in this. This shows the tremendous political consciousness and the faith in democracy of the ordinary people in this country. The other important feature here has been, because we always believed men are more advanced and women are more underdeveloped in this country, the gap between men and women voter turnout has been quite a lot over the years. Our aim has been more and more women should come forward and vote. Even though from the very beginning, from Nehruvian years itself, a lot of women enjoyed themselves, entertained themselves and very enthusiastically came and voted, the figure still remained small. So, the figure remained much less than what the men voted, but that is what we call gap. This gap in 1952 was almost 16%. 16% of women voted less than the men did it. This gap has been bridged over a period of time by a lot of lobbying, advocacy, propaganda, working with the people, awakening them and their own interests going up or their own economic and political indicators going up, more and more women coming forward. So, the gap has now got reduced to 2.76. So, 16% now it is only 2.7%. This is a great advancement and speaks well for the Indian democracy as such and the participation of various sections of women and others voting in this country. We also found in the recent elections, 2014 elections, a lot of other types of features coming out of our elections. One is in 16 out of the 29 states which went to vote in May 2014, we have more women than men who came out to vote. 169 constituencies witnessed more women than men coming out and voting. This has always been a feature in some of the northern eastern states like Mizoram or Meghalaya, but this time it has gone to very many other states also. So, in many states now you are witnessing more women than men even are coming out and voting, thereby it speaks for the political consciousness, political empowerment of women in this country. Once again the number of candidates. How many candidates stood in these elections, how many candidates finally won in the elections is also very important for a democracy. And we have had any number of elections where lots and lots of men have come out and voted and contested in the elections. So, we have from 1952 onwards once again some figures which tells us what are the number of men and women who stood as the candidates in these elections. To give you something out of these figures, we have 7,532 men and 631 women, a very large number, who contested for the Lok Sabha elections in May 2014. This is a very big increase in the number of men and women who have been standing in the elections in the previous years, which means more men want to become representatives, more men and women want to participate in governance and thereby be representatives and strengthen democracy in this country. And so also when you think in terms of how many of them are getting elected, the number of women getting elected has also gone up. From the very beginning to now. In 1952, we had only 22 women in our parliament, in our Lok Sabha, lower house. This has now gone up to 61 in the 2014 elections, almost one of the highest figures we have been able to record in our Lok Sabha membership. But of course, it is not too much of an advanced leap from our previous election, because in the previous elections we had 59 women who were chosen to our parliament. So, from 59 this time we have gone only up to 61, just about 2 more. That is not a great record as such. So, one has to increase this number much more. More women should participate, more women should contest and more women should be elected in our elections, which means more political parties, especially the stronger political parties, should put up women candidates so that they can win the election and be member of the parliament. This is precisely where we have a big movement outside which talks in terms of 33% reservation for women in parliament, because women are still not able to come through the elections in large numbers. So, all that we have achieved in 2014, it only comes up to 11.3%, which has been the highest so far in this country by way of women members in the parliament. So, this is something we have to work more, because countries like the Scandinavian countries, even United States and many other countries in the world have more women in the parliament than we have. They even have gone by about 50% or so. So, we still need to work on this to make our parliament representative of all sections of the population. Of course, there are other sections like SC and ST who also constitute the weaker sections of Indian society, but then because we have had a reservation for them from 1952 onwards, a constitutional reservation proportionate to their population in the country, we have 22% reservation for SC and 5% reservation for ST, which had moved up in the recent times, so that we have that much of members of parliament from SC and ST. Similar reservation not being there either for OBC or for women, the representation of women in the parliament is still very low. So, we do have these women, but many parties still believe women are not winnable candidates. That is, you put them up, but they do not win, they will not win. This is a very wrong premise. It is not true. Women do not get the candidate seats, tickets, but those whom you put as persons in tickets, many of them do win. For instance, this time 631 candidates stood, out of which 61 candidates have won, which is almost little more than even 10% of the candidates who stood in these elections. So, this is not really believable that women are not winnable candidates, especially when you compare it with the number of men who have stood and the number of men who have won in these elections. So, I think this is something which we should refute, and so more women should be found to be capable of standing, capable of winning and capable of representing the country in the parliament as such. One can also find in this context that there are the number of women who stand in the elections and the number of women who are able to win in the elections in the past, so many elections we have had, as a large number of women coming from states like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, who are normally not considered as belonging to the developed belt of India. The developed belt is usually associated with Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Punjab. These are regions, or northeastern states. Northeastern states, the women are much more liberated and have almost 100% literacy, but we find it is these states which send less number of women to parliament. Kerala very often sends only one person or sometimes not even that. Northeastern states, there are 7 states in northeastern India whom we call the 7 sisters. They have not been sending even one woman to the parliament in the past so many elections. Assam is the only state from where we are getting 2-3 women members to the parliament. The rest of the states, 7 sisters, starting with Sikkim and going to Nagaland, Mizoram, Manipur, Meghalaya, none of them have been sent, Tripura, none of them have been sending any woman into the parliament. So, somehow it is a very amusing and a contradictory picture you have, that the more backward the state is, undeveloped the state is, more women are coming as candidates and more women are put up by the political parties, and so more women are coming into the parliament. We have to get over this contradiction. Women from the developed states also should come up, because they are more educated, they are more empowered, they are more talking type, they are more exposed. So, we would like to have those women also to be in our parliament. We also have another category in India, which is not too popular in the other countries in the world, called independent candidates. From the very beginning, from 1952 onwards, we have had people who are standing in the elections not belonging to any political party, either because the political parties do not pick them up and give tickets to somebody else. So, they feel frustrated and they stand and believe that they must be there, they are capable, they want to be there. So, they stand as independents. This was in the earlier times. Now, we find all types of candidates are standing in the elections as independents. One doesn't know why. Is it only ego, or is it only the belief that they will win, or is it only the commitment that they have to serve the country, or whether there are other factors which are going into the elections, like the subsidized elections, other types of advantages, which perhaps both political and economic, which may be making more and more people come out as independents. There are a lot of women who are also standing as independents, though they lose out, and very rarely the independents are able to win the elections, because there are political parties, strong political parties all over India, and it is both the national parties, regional parties, which really put up candidates and win, and not so much the independent candidates. Occasionally we may get one or two independent candidates, but even they, when you go into the details, you will find they have been backed by some political party or other for ulterior reasons. So, with the result, independence is a losing category in India, but it is a category which has to be taken into account and cannot be ruled out, because a lot of people want to contest the election, and as per the constitution, every adult in this country have a right to contest the election, stand as a candidate. So, it cannot be denied to them. Then there is a new category which has new type of voting, which has been introduced in the recent elections for the first time. This is mainly because the voter turnout in India is still low. It is only in the 60s. Though individually you may have some states, some constituencies which may have 70–80%. The country as a whole has not been able to go beyond 60s, never into 70s. Partly because there are many people who do not want to go and vote in the elections, not because they do not know, but because they know too much. Many of them are conscious citizens who, in their frustration or have a negative thinking that none of the political parties or none of the candidates who are standing in the election is worth their support. They are disillusioned with our politics, they are disillusioned with our political parties and our politicians. So, they want to express themselves, and we would like to know how many in this country are this type, who know what is an election, but still do not go and vote in the elections, who are able, conscious citizens of this country, but still abstain from voting on that election day. To get this, the Election Commission, the recent elections, introduced a category called Nota. After putting up all the candidates who are standing in the election in the list, the Election Commission has added one more category called Nota, that is none of the above. None of the above. We do not want any of these people who are standing in this election. So, that will tell us that people who are conscious, who are not voting, are not really illiterate or do not know, but people who consciously have been abstaining in the past. So, in this election we had it, and out of curiosity I tried to find out how many people in this country have voted for Nota in the recent Lok Sabha elections. Fortunately, not too many. Only 1.1% voting, about 22 lakhs people voted for Nota all over India. Not much, this is very, very little, 2 lakhs people out of millions of crores of people voting. So, this is not something bad, and we find the maximum amount of this voting has come from Tamil Nadu. Maybe because the parties were bickering, the national parties were absent, only the two regional parties were on, and there were a lot of other reasons in the politics. So, many people did not vote for any one of them. So, we had about 20% voting in Tamil Nadu going for Nota. This has to be taken note of by the political parties, that they did not give them the vote, they did not give the others also the vote, but they did not give them also the vote. So, they should try and now campaign and lobby with these 20% and please them before the next election. So, that is a way of the voters also giving out their opinion of the candidates of the political parties and their performance in the election as such. So, this is why the elections have been. Now, we have also had another feature. When we started in India in 1952, we had all the elections together. center as well as states together. The first 4 elections, 62, 67, 72 till 67, we had all the elections together. But after 1967 election, when we were due for the next election in 72, in 71, the ruling party at the center became a minority party. It was led by Congress, led by Mrs. Indira Gandhi. She chose to go to election a little earlier because she had done a lot of good policies before that. She wanted to see how the people have changed now, whether there is a support for her policies. So, in 1971, we had a midterm poll. When we had this midterm poll, now it changed the calendar of our elections. So, a year after, the Lok Sabha elections became different from the state assembly elections. They began taking place at different times. So, also in 1967 elections, we had a lot of coalition governments which came up in various states in India, and many of them, not all of them, but many of them proved to be unstable and began falling off very early. So, many of them are also followed by elections. So, the different states began having elections at different times. So, we do not anymore have in this country one uniform time and a clean elections, clear elections the way the United States has. Every 2 years, every 4 years, presidential election every 2 years, congressional elections. This sort of a clear-cut calendar we do not have anymore. So, we have a messy of elections in this country now, maze of elections in this country now, and because of this, what has become in India, a good advantage of this is every year has become an election year in this country. Maybe here, maybe there, maybe in Kerala, maybe in Punjab, but there is an election which goes on almost every year, not one but 2 or 3 states which take place, and you have the regular Lok Sabha elections. This is good in a way for democracy. It is good because the ruling powers, both in the states as well as at the center, the ruling parties and the opposition parties are always on their guard. They have been campaigning, they have to be campaigning somewhere or other every year. So, their policies come under scrutiny and we are able to judge them quietly. At the same time, this is good for the issues because the issues really get propped up. Do not have to wait for 5 years before an issue comes up, whether it's national or regional issues. They keep coming up every now and then. So, one knows how the country is moving. The results also show every now and then which party is popular, which party is doing well, which party is doing not well, things like this. At the same time, the negative aspect about it is the whole country seems to be always geared to election. Other developmental issues and other types of governance gets into the back shelf. Also, it's an expensive proposition. It's a very expensive proposition to go on having elections here and there every now and then. But then it's okay, it's a part of our country, it's a part of our methodology, and ultimately it keeps our people politically conscious and aware and discussing our politics all the time. So, it has given tremendous political empowerment to our ordinary people in this country. All these elections which have become more and more complicated, bigger and bigger in size, with more and more population coming in, with more and more constituencies coming in, has made the Central Election Commission's task very much more complicated. That is why in the beginning we had only one election commissioner of India. From 1952 to almost 1990, we had only one election commissioner in this country who with a big bureaucratic setup, was an independent, constitutionally autonomous person, and his entire setup called the Election Commission was looking after this particular big machine operated elections in this country. But that was becoming a little too difficult for one man operation. So, with the result, we expanded the Election Commission to consist of 3 election commissioners, with one of them being the chief election commissioner of this country. So, almost from the time when Mr. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister of this country, we have now 3-member commission, not 1-member commission, one of them being the chief election commissioner. And they together with a huge setup monitor, conduct act as a watchdog, and are also able to bring about some reforms in our elections in this country, and conduct, of course, the elections all over India. So, the election commission has become a troika, a 3-member commission, though of late some people are saying should go back to a single election commissioner, but the arguments have not been really put forward very strongly. This commission has a lot of challenges before it. I will try to go through it quickly possible. The first biggest challenge before the commission is the huge size, the vast size of constituencies, the remote constituencies, and the vast size of the electorate, which means their preparations become very difficult, and throughout the year they have to be working on it. With more and more elections coming in various parts of India all the time, they do not even get any rest in between, but they are working round the clock to hold the elections in one part of India, rather all the time, thrown in also by by-elections and mid-elections and other elections. With the result, it becomes quite a difficult task and a round-the-year task for the election commission. Then there are some constituencies in this country which are very difficult to reach, either by roads or because of the seasonal variation. When the rest of India is going through elections in, say, November or December, portions in Himalayas are snow-clad, with the result either you can have to postpone the elections, or your election commissioners and the others have to walk through severe ice to reach them and hold the elections. It is also difficult for the people to go and vote there. So, often we postpone them to a better season after 2 or 3 months it happens. There are many parts of India which are still not reachable by a good modern transport. Only the jeep or something can go through because the roads have not been very good. It happens in the northeast. Very difficult. There are hilly areas, roads are all slopey, you cannot send any transport vehicles there. You only have to walk through the entire place. So, that makes the task of election officials very, very difficult. But we still have been going through with that for a long time, thanks to the commitment and the hard work which our election returning officers and others are putting into that. The seasonal variation, then suddenly you have a flood, suddenly you have huge rain, suddenly you have tsunami or something like that, an earthquake. These are also coming up because India is a very big country, anything can happen in any part of India at any time. The problems which are created by human beings in this are the problems of money, power and muscle power. Over a period of time, elections have become very expensive for us. The political parties by themselves are not able to face all these elections, even though many of them may receive a lot of donations. So, they are also tempted to bring in rich people to fight the elections, people who have money backing to fight the elections, and armed people who have been supported by big power money. With the result, the role of money power has become extremely important in our elections. So, the elections have become expensive, so you have more of money power. The more of money power is there, so the elections have become ostentatious and extremely expensive for any normal person to go and contest the elections. The same thing is happening also by way of violence in our elections. To win the elections, the candidates are ready to use any power by any crook and means they are wanting to win the elections. That has led to a lot of violence in these elections, and of course, with more money power, it is possible to buy more muscle power. With the result, all of them have bought muscle power with them, and violence has come up. In this, then the violence is not merely played by those who are backing the regular candidates, but even criminals have begun standing in the elections as directly as candidates. You have dacoits, you have smugglers, those who have criminal records with the police stations, who are all being, or those who have been already punished, and after 3 years they are all coming up as our candidates. Naturally, when criminals contest election, it is going to follow, they have a lot of muscle power, it is going to lead to a lot of violence in this country. So, this is where the role of corruption comes in those who have to contest the elections will have to have a lot of money to back them. That cannot come from regular job or regular money. It has to come only from the undeclared money, unaccounted money and unaccounted donations, things like this. With the result, the corruption has become quite a lot in our elections. So everybody is talking about these things in these days, and so the role of criminalities, role of violence, and above all preventing the women from contesting the elections, because now naturally it is very difficult for women to contest an election which is full of violence and money power. And so women are not merely abstain themselves, but women are also kept away by the men, by the political parties, saying they cannot contest these elections because the elections have become very tainted in this country with money and muscle power. With the result, many persons, many intellectuals, many political parties and the Election Commission itself has been discussing over a period of time how to reform our elections. From the time we had Mr. Session as our Chief Election Commissioner, as our Election Commissioner, a lot of campaigns and lobbying have taken place in this country to make the voters awareness and to bring them into the elections. We started with the voter awareness campaigns, and many NGOs and the universities undertook voter awareness camps all over, so that more and more women will come and vote and stand in the elections. Thereby it might cleanse the politics of this country. Then the other thing is the electoral laws are being changed so that those who adopt unsavory means like having communal propaganda or adopting criminal records or putting up people or had their own personal criminal records would be barred from contesting the elections. So quite a few candidates like Bal Thackeray have been barred for a period of 6 years because of their communal propaganda against religions, against others. And there are people like leaders like Lalu Prasad Yadav and perhaps now Jayalalitha, who may be barred from contesting the elections for a period of 4 years or so if they have been found fault on corruption or other charges by the courts and given a charge sheet. Even with all these types of reforms, we also have the Election Commission now coming out with an accountability profile. Namely, they are asking the candidates to declare their criminal record, apart from their assets, not merely in their own name, but in the name of their family, particularly the name of their wives, what are the assets they have, and so that people will know where they come from, and the corruption part of it will also get clear. Quite a few media adopts this practice of comparing the assets given by the candidates in the last election and the assets given by the candidates in this election, so that they are able to see how much money these candidates have made over a period of time, whether they are successful or unsuccessful in the elections as such. So it gives a certain amount of transparency in this country, a certain amount of accountability to our politicians, and it also gives a certain chance to the voters to know who are the candidates, who have a criminal record, who have. Of course, all the candidates have to furnish this, and one expects them to be honest about it, and the Election Commission sees to it they are honest. And that gives us a chance to choose the correct type of a person. So these are all some of the reforms we have been having over the period of time. But still, unfortunately, when we go and see the candidates and those who are contesting the elections, we find still there are a lot of wrong candidates who have been able to stand in the elections. They have a criminal record, they have hidden it or they have overcome it, and even if they are criminal records, the people seem to be choosing them as members of our parliament. You do have in the parliament a certain number of people whom the media comes out every now and then as criminals, giving their past records and that. So we have more than 60 persons in our members of parliament belonging to various political parties, some have more, some have less, whom they have identified as criminals. Of course, the money power is very clear and very visible. that the real rich people stand in the elections or get elected. Quite a lot of people in the parliament and state assemblies or people with a big money bag. They've had it before, they have made it after the elections. So we are not still able to prevent the criminals or the people with unaccounted money from coming into parliament as our representatives, so that the other people are not able to move forward and come in to represent our country as such. We would like to have more of such honest, committed, literate, wise people to get into our parliament, but we still have to have a long struggle to do that. We still have a very small number of people who coming from women and weaker sections. So we find that another type of reforms we need to undertake in this country to make more and more women participate in the elections. Our political parties particularly have to change, have a changed mindset. The political parties' notions of winnability about women, of not able to giving a preference to men, because somewhere by hook or crook the men will bring the result which the women cannot, that they are soft creatures. That mindset, gender mindset, has to be changed, and they have to believe if there has to be a clean politics, there has to be more women. If there are more women, there will be a cleaner politics in this country. So lots of suggestions are coming up on this. Reservation of constituencies is one suggestion which has come up very strong in this country. We have taken it up, passed it in the Rajya Sabha, the two elections before, but it still has not come into Lok Sabha to be passed. It's still waiting for Lok Sabha to take it up. When it does, when we get 33% women in the parliament, in the Lok Sabha, maybe our politics also will become a little more clean. That is what we would like to have. We are also saying if the money power is coming very big in the elections, then how do we face it? Why is it other countries do not have this problem as much as we have it? In South Asia, it is a big problem. In countries like UK, they have a state fund for it, candidates. The minute a candidate is declared himself and the political party declares him or her, he becomes eligible to receive a certain amount of funding from the state. So financial support is given to him or her from the state. So they don't have to spend a lot of money on this. With the result, any person who is keen about it can contest the election. Any group, any NGO or any group can put up a candidate and campaign for that candidate, because the funding will come from the state and not from any unknown sources or from wrong sources. And everybody can get the state funding, so there is no discrimination on this. Then there has to be more strict monitoring of the muzzle and money power, both by the election commission, and there should be a changed mindset of the political parties not to give tickets to such persons, thinking that they are more winnable than the others. Because winnability is not on the lines of criminals and money power, but on the lines of parties' issues, parties' performance and other things. But we still find the political parties seem to be lacking confidence in their own manifestos, in their own performance, that they are bringing these people to win the elections by back doors. Of course, reservation and quota for women for SC/ST model should be there. And then we have to gender sensitize the political parties as well as the election commission. Though the election commission is quite sensitized on many ways, but still it has to go out of the way to see how exactly to give a little privilege to the candidates. This can be done as it was done in Nepal, where the election commission and the state rule was every political party should have at least 5% of its candidates from the weaker sections from women. Just as now they have said every political party has to have so much of proportion of SC and ST. So also every political party should put up at least a certain percentage of its candidates from among women. Whether they win or not is another issue, but at least they will be candidates there, and the chances of their winning, if they come from a good political party, is also much brighter. So, this is some of these things the Election Commission can do by bringing in some such changes. To finally sort of sum up, we find that with all these challenges, with all these problems involved, with all this improvement needed, the Indian election experiment is one of the most successful experiments in world's democracy. That is why it has created so much of anxiety, but also so much of curiosity in the entire world, that at the time of election, streams and streams of political pundits, party leaders, international agencies come up to India to watch and the elections in India. The amount of literature which has come up on Indian elections in the various countries of the world, whether it is in Australia or Japan or UK or Canada or United States, there is a lot of literature which has come up on Indian elections, which serve as a big resource material for those of us who are doing research on Indian elections. That shows how attractive the Indian elections are, and a lot of data has emerged in the Indian elections. So, this is still an election which has followed many best practices with the support of Election Commission, with the able guidance and monitoring by the Election Commission, with even a lot of cooperation from our own political parties and politicians. The elections in India has become a very successful experiment. Of course, with the increasing political awareness and participation by the citizens, which is responsible for the success and the fairness of our election. If election becomes improved with more political education from the people, people get more political education from election. That is why even the remote rural areas and not so illiterate people have become politically aware, and thereby I must say that in this entire world, we are one of the important stable democracies, and in the South Asia region, we have been the stablest democracy. We have not had a military rule, we have not violated our constitution, we still remain as a secular democracy, we still follow look after our weaker sections in the country. So, we have not had periodical challenges, we have not had a dictatorship, we have not even had a small authoritarian rule. Even when we had emergency, within a year it was reversed and we had an election. So, India really takes the cake among the South Asian countries as the most stable democracy. And this is made possible, one of the important contributors is our political parties. We will take it up tomorrow when we meet again. Thank you. Thanks a lot.